So let's just state the obvious. We're all living in a world that now operates at AI speed. And that's a huge problem. Because the very structures we've relied on for over 100 years, the traditional ways we build and run our companies, they're starting to crack under all this pressure.
And this really forces us to ask a fundamental question, one we're going to dig into today. For generations, the big goal was to build a company that could last, a durable, unchanging fortress, right? But in a world that's constantly being disrupted, is that even the right goal anymore? Or is the real key to survival something totally different? Is it adaptability?
Okay, so this slide really lays out the two warring paradigms here. On the left, you've got the old-school machine model. It's all about being predictable, top-down, and trying to control everything like a piece of clockwork. But on the right, you have something totally different, the living organism. This sees the company as an ecosystem that doesn't just follow orders, but actually senses its environment and allows new solutions to emerge from the inside.
Now, this machine model, it came straight out of the industrial age. It was fantastic for efficiency, for specialization, for breaking down complex problems into tiny little parts. And look, it worked beautifully for a stable, predictable world. But in today's environment, where everything is changing all the time, that rigidity has become a massive weakness. It's a brittleness that can cause the whole system to just shatter.
All right, so if the machine model is broken, what do we replace it with? The answer, it turns out, isn't in an engineering textbook, it's in a biology textbook. We need to start thinking about our companies as living organizations.
At the heart of this new way of thinking is something called a complex adaptive system, or CAS for short. You know the best way to think about it? A flock of birds, or a school of fish. There's no CEO bird telling everyone, okay, now bank left. Instead, each agent, and that could be a person, a team, or even an AI, is just following a few simple local rules. But from all those simple interactions, this incredibly intelligent, coordinated pattern emerges for the whole system. The whole really is so much more than the sum of its parts.
And you can imagine, this requires a huge mindset shift from our leaders. Your job is no longer to be the master engineer trying to design every single gear and pull every lever. Instead, you become more like a gardener. You don't command a plant to grow, right? You cultivate the soil, you provide the water and sunlight, and you create the right conditions for success to emerge all on its own. So you might be thinking, okay, great theory, but how do I actually do this? Well, it starts by defining a crystal clear purpose. That's your North Star that guides everybody. Then you have to map out how work and information are actually flowing through the company, not just how the org chart says they should. Then, instead of creating a bunch of restrictive rules, you design enabling constraints. Think of them like the rules of a game that actually encourage creativity. And finally, you're constantly poking and probing the system with small, safe-to-fail experiments so you can learn and adapt on the fly.
Okay, theory is one thing, but what does this actually look like in practice? Let's break down the real architecture, the anatomy, of a company that is truly built to adapt.
This quote, I think, just cuts right through all the noise. Your org chart, the hierarchy, all the fancy titles, none of it matters one bit unless it's making the flow of value from a cool idea to a happy customer happen faster. The goal isn't a perfect structure, the goal is speed and flow, period. To get that kind of flow, companies are becoming composable. And honestly, the best way to think about this is with Lego bricks. Seriously, instead of one giant monolithic business, your company is made of distinct interchangeable blocks. A block for payments, a block for customer data, and so on. This way, you can reconfigure and snap these pieces together in totally new ways to respond to any challenge or opportunity super fast.
In this Lego brick idea, it doesn't just apply to software, it applies to your teams. A really powerful framework for this is called team topologies. The idea is instead of organizing people by their job title, like all the engineers over here, you organize them around the flow of value. So you have teams that ship stuff directly to customers, teams that build the internal platforms everyone else uses, and expert teams that help other teams get smarter. It's all about creating clear lanes to reduce complexity and just speed things up.
Now, of course, a structure like this can't run on a traditional top-down pyramid. It would grind to a halt. That's where frameworks like Holacracy and Sociocracy 3.0 come in. They're all about distributing decision-making. You can think of Holacracy as a full operating system you install all at once, focused on the roles people have. Sociocracy 3.0 is more like an app store. You can just adopt the pieces you need, and it focuses more on collaboration. But the goal for both is exactly the same. Let the team solve problems right where they happen. Okay, now let's bring in the real game changer, AI. But we're not talking about AI as just another tool you use. We're talking about AI as the operational nervous system for the entire organization, a coordinating layer of agents that connects everything together.
This is often called an AI operating system, or an AIOS. It's basically a software layer that sits on top of everything else in your company. Its job is to connect all the different agents, both human and AI, manage the shared context so everyone's working from the same playbook, and enforce the rules of the road.
So, this AIOS really does three crucial things. First, it acts like a shared brain or a memory for the whole organization, so everyone is working from the same reality. Second, it's an orchestration engine, kind of like a traffic cop for complex workflows that span multiple teams. And third, and this is so important, it provides that human oversight and governance, putting up guardrails to make sure all this autonomous activity stays on track and is trustworthy.
So, when you combine this adaptive organizational structure with an AI nervous system, well, the very definition of what it takes to win in business completely changes. What is the new competitive moat in the age of AI?
It's not about being the biggest anymore. It's about being the fastest. The new competitive advantage, the new moat, is what we call deployment velocity. It's the raw, unadulterated ability of your organization to take a new technology or a new idea and get it into production, creating value, faster than your rivals can even figure out what's happening.
And if you want to see the economic earthquake this creates, just look at this chart. AI-first companies can completely decouple their revenue growth from their headcount. Think about that. You don't need to hire more people to make more money, you just scale by adding more compute power. This creates a fundamentally different and way higher level of productivity.
Which brings us right back around to the role of the leader. This journey to becoming an adaptive, agentic enterprise, it's a radical cultural shift. Leadership is no longer about engineering the perfect machine. It is, once again, about being a gardener, shaping the environment, nurturing the system, and cultivating the conditions for intelligent, adaptive behavior to emerge.
So we'll end right where we began, but with a question that should hit a little differently now. Take a really hard look at your own organization, its structure, its culture, its leadership. Is it a rigid machine built for a world that just doesn't exist anymore? Or is it becoming a living, adaptive system ready for whatever the next century throws at it?